Hello everyone and welcome to a game a lot of you guys requested ever since we did that video with Stockfish and Chessmaster, where Stockfish had the white pieces and the Grandmaster edition of Chessmaster had the black pieces. I'm not going to do a long introduction like I already did, as we already paired the 1991 version of Chessmaster, the one from the Nintendo Entertainment System, against this Stockfish, and we also paired the Grandmaster edition of Chessmaster that was published in 2007, I believe. Yeah, it was 15 years ago, and Stockfish won very convincingly with the white pieces. Then you guys requested to see what would happen if Chessmaster wielded the white pieces. Would the game be any different, and would it be more of a challenge for Stockfish? So for those of you who are just joining us, do check out the first two videos I made in the series, as there is quite a lot explained there. Now let's check out the game. It is Chessmaster with the white pieces, and Chessmaster opens with knight to f3. So also Chessmaster goes for the reti opening. I said that even though Stockfish wanted to play the reti, I forced Stockfish to play e4 since I'm more of an e4 player, but Chessmaster obviously needs all the edge that it can get, so I allowed the Chessmaster to play the reti opening, and I did not interfere in any way whatsoever. So Stockfish replies with pawn to d5. We have d4 now, knight to f6 and c4. We have now entered some sort of a queen's pawn opening, and here pawn to e6. Stockfish now goes into a full queen's gambit decline. We have pawn to e3, bishop to e7, and bishop to d3 by Chessmaster. D captures on c4, bishop captures, and pawn to c4. So this has been played many times in modern chess, even in the previous years. Even in 2022 there are games that reach this exact same position. We have castles now, castles by Chessmaster, and c captures on d4. We have e captures, and now there is a game that was played in 2017 in the World Rapid Championship between Stelios Halakias and Georg Mayer, that was won very nicely by Georg Mayer wielding the black pieces, but in that game castles was played. Here we have pawn to a6, and it is now already, as of move 8, that we have a completely new game. So of course b5 is coming, and usually you would expect something like knight to c3, knight to e5, and only after after pawn to b5 would you move the bishop, but Chessmaster actually does it preemptively. So okay, knight to c6, and now knight to c3. Of course the d4 pawn cannot be captured. If you go for this, then bishop to b5 check, and the black loses the queen, but of course again Chessmaster doesn't know what kind of an opponent he's playing against. So here Stockfish just castles, and the bishop to f4. Finally b5 by Stockfish, and now a3, stopping b4, bishop to b7, and now rook to e1. So just nicely developing, both Stockfish and Chessmaster. Rook to c8, rook to c1, and now Stockfish says, all right, everything is nicely developed, it's time to push b4. So pawn to b4. And main point, I believe, is that after a captures and knight captures that was played in the game, bishop to b1 is impossible. If you could play bishop to b1 and keep control of this diagonal, this would be great. However, it loses a pawn by force. You just capture on f3 and then pick up the pawn on d4. So that's why after knight captures on b4, Chessmaster has to play bishop to e2. Now, of course, the bishop captures is met by bishop captures, and the queen keeps defending the d4 pawn. And now just knight f to d5, just winning some more squares here, improving the position of the knights. And now bishop to g3. Again, bishop to d2 is the move you'd expect, as you would control all of these squares and control the knight on d5. But Chessmaster is just built different, as it would seem. And here, pawn to a5. At some point, Stockfish is planning to capture on c3. So if he can somehow force Chessmaster to play b captures on c3, this will be a pass pawn. So queen to d2, and now pawn to h6, taking away the g5 square from Chessmaster, and now knight to a4. Chessmaster says, all right, I'm going to put my knight on c5, and that will be a monster knight. If you ever capture it, I'm going to play d captures on c5 and have a beautiful passed c pawn. So knight back to f6, with the idea that if knight comes to c5, Stockfish can immediately challenge it with knight to e4. This would attack the queen and the knight here. And now just rook captures on c8. This is a necessary move, because if you go for knight to c5 right away, it doesn't even need knight to e4. It actually wins by force. You just play bishop captures on f3 and you win a piece. Bishop captures, rook captures on c5, and after rook captures, bishop captures, and you cannot recapture, as the queen queen hangs on d2. So of course, Chessmaster spots this, plays rook captures on c8 first, queen captures, and now rook to c1 with tempo, winning the c file. Queen to a8, now grabbing hold of this diagonal, and now preparing to bring the rook over into the game. So queen to d1 by Chessmaster, and now bishop to c6. You know that the knight is coming to c5, so you might as well force it there. So knight to c5, and now rook to c8. We have rook to c3, and now comes rook back to d8, aligning the rook nicely with the queen here. So queen to e1, getting out of any future harm's way, and now finally Stockfish goes for knight to e4, and here the rook is attacked, the knight is attacked, and you sort of have to trade here. So knight captures on e4, bishop captures on e4, and now comes bishop to c7. A weird move, you'd expect something like rook to c7, but Chessmaster's idea is probably that if rook to c8, then bishop back to g3 offers a rook trade, and if rook captures, then queen captures. Of course, we are not going to capture with the pawn and allow Stockfish to pass a pawn. And here, it's a fine position for both white and black. You can play this. However, Stockfish moves the rook back to f8, and now we have bishop to f1. And this bishop to f1 is basically the moment of the game. Here, Chessmaster is giving Stockfish a deadly dare, saying that, okay, if you go for knight to d5, I will definitely capture with the queen on e4, and you will win my rook for 2 pieces. So is this actually good for white or good for black? Stockfish says, well, I'm Stockfish, I can calculate much better than you, and Stockfish indeed goes for knight to d5. And this is where I believe the difference in the power of just brute force calculating really comes into effect. So here we have queen captures on e4, knight captures on c3, Grandmaster, or Chessmaster Grandmaster Edition happily trades queens here, captures, and the b captures on c3. So Chessmaster won the 2 pieces for the rook, now has a knight and a light square bishop for the rook, but Stockfish has a pass pawn, and there's already a rook behind the pass pawn. So what do you do when you have a rook behind a pass pawn? You, of course, start pushing it. Stockfish plays pawn to a4, and now we have knight to e1. We have pawn to a3 and knight to c2, pawn to a2, and just the bishop back to f4. So I believe this is the position that Chessmaster saw when it offered that trade 2 pieces for the rook, most likely Chessmaster was expecting a1 queen, and then of course you give up 1 piece, rook captures, and you have this position where Stockfish is down a pawn, so you have the extra c pawn that's already a pass pawn. You can play g3 just not get checkmated anytime soon, and it's very hard for black to force things here. After like some 100 moves will be played, this is most likely winning for black, especially with Stockfish wielding the black pieces. But of course, you will still have counterplay. You have the bishop pair, you have the pass pawn here, and let's say even if you make one silly move, just c4, and already those pawns are marching forward. However, Stockfish did not have this in mind. Pawn to a1. Stockfish, in fact, finds rook to a3, just going after the c3 pawn. And of course, you cannot capture the rook, as then Stockfish just brings a queen into the game. So here, knight to a1, now blocking the a1 square, rook captures on c3. And this was a very, very important pawn for the Chessmaster to have. To have a game plan, basically. Bishop to d2, attacking the rook, now rook to c6. You do not want to allow the bishop to come to c4 and pick up the a2 pawn. So bishop to e3, we have bishop to a3, now threatening bishop to b2, and if this lands, then it will be very, very scary. So here, Chessmaster finds pawn to d5. It's a very nice defensive resource. You sacrifice a pawn, you play bishop b5, bishop a4, bishop b3, and you pick up the a2 pawn. So this is what Chessmaster finds. So e captures on d5, now bishop to b5 with check. You don't have to worry about getting checkmated. Your bishop is covering c1, and also you can always retreat with bishop to f1, even if the rook could somehow deliver a check. So rook to c3, we have bishop to a4, continuing with the plan of bishop b3, bishop captures on a2, and now just to d4. And now you have a problem. You've moved your bishop away from this diagonal, and you cannot capture. If you capture, rook c1 will be checkmate. You have to block. This is now checkmate. So after d4, bishop to d2 by Chessmaster, and now rook to d3. We have bishop to e1, and now finally bishop to b2. And now the problem is, if you try to defend this, knight to c2 and try and force a1 queen, knight captures, Stockfish has rook to d1. Now the d1 square is no longer covered by the bishop, and if king f1, trying to not get checkmated, then d3 attacks the knight, knight to e3 attacks the rook, just the rook captures on e1, king captures a1 queen, and of course that's it. So after this bishop to b2 move, bishop to b3, Stockfish has to allow this, so the a2 pawn will be captured, but Stockfish now has other plans. Bishop captures on a1, bishop captures on a2, and now rook to d1. And it seems like it's still playable. You still have the bishop pair against the bishop and rook, but it only seems that way. The problem is if king to f1, trying to defend your bishop, d3 stops the king from going to e2, and once you play anything, let's say bishop b3, the rook will just move. There's really no defense against pawn to d2. Whatever you play, pawn to d2 is coming, and here Chessmaster can resign. So here there is no way of stopping rook captures on e1. So basically you only your only option is not to get checkmated. So d3, Stockfish playing it cool, not even capturing the bishop right away. King f2, now bishop to d4 with check. King f3, and only now rook captures on e1. So now the bishop will have to be given away for the pawn, but now of course everyone realizes that Stockfish is easily winning this. We have bishop to a4 and rook to a1 queen, bishop captures and rook captures on d1. And now Stockfish is just up 2 pieces, a bishop and the rook, and it would be pointless to show you how the game ends, but Stockfish even makes fun out of this position, so I will show it. King to e2, rook to h1 going after the pawns, h3, rook to g1 goes after this pawn, king f3 defending, rook f1 check, king to e4, and now bishop to b6. We have g3, trying to save those pawns for as long as possible, rook to h1, pawn to h4, now comes pawn to h5, not allowing the pawns to advance any further, king f3, now rook to g1, and the king can no longer keep an eye on the g3 pawn, so king to e4, and now rook captures on g3, king to d5, and now it's actually a forced checkmate in 10, and Stockfish of course finds it. Rook to c3, we have pawn to f5, now bishop to d8. Now Stockfish is planning bishop to f6, and this will keep the white king locked in this tiny square. So king to d4, bishop to f6 check, king to e4, and now bishop captures on h4. King back to e5, bishop to f6 check, king to e4, and now just h4. Now this pawn is becoming a queen, and that's basically it. King d5, h3, king to d6, h2, king to d7, and now h1 queen. And it doesn't matter where Chessmaster goes. If king here, then queen to d1 is checkmate. So Chessmaster played king to e8, and of course Stockfish delivered queen to c6 checkmate. And it is only as of move 68 that Chessmaster was bested. So it was quite an impressive game. I would say a much better one than when Chessmaster had the black pieces, but still. I mean, it was sort of an equal game. You know, the opening was okay, the middle game was okay, but as soon as the moment came where Chessmaster tried to outcalculate Stockfish when this. Basically when knight to d5 was played, or rather even when bishop to f1 was played and allowed knight to d5, this is where we knew that Stockfish would just, you know, have a brilliant game. And I believe it all came down to this point where here Chessmaster was kind of considering maybe a pawn to a1, but Stockfish just, you know, completely crushed the position with rook to e3. So yeah, Chessmaster really played well, played the opening, you know, just like a modern engine, maybe a few more aggressive lines than a modern engine would choose, but then it all came down basically to how well you can calculate, and no one calculates as well as Stockfish until the next version of Stockfish, or until they power up Alpha Zero again, or you know, until Leela Chess Zero plays some sort of a brilliant game. So there are some very impressive games amongst the modern engines, but you know, most of the time the NNUE Stockfish does usually reign supreme. So yeah, nice try by our good friend the Chessmaster. It was quite an interesting game, so hope you guys enjoyed it. We tried to give Chessmaster justice, giving it the white pieces, but it was not enough to take down Stockfish. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want a bit more history about Chessmaster, about this match that we've organized, do check out the previous two videos. Both links will be in the description below, so check that out as well. I would like to thank John Shirtliff, Keith Tester, and Gabriel Rodriguez, Ivan Sterling, and John Austin for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.